It's Tuesday, the 28th of March, 1922. 30,000 Italian black shirts, led by Benito Mussolini, marched on Rome ready to take power using whatever means possible. With their leader having declared only a few days earlier, our program is simple. We want to rule Italy. The agenda was clear and their methods even clearer. Mussolini was willing to sacrifice the lives of the black shirts to gain power, and the black shirts were willing to sacrifice their lives for their leader. As chance would have it, the King of Italy, King Victor Emmanuel III, wasn't keen for the streets of his capital to run red with the blood of Italians, and sought to ensure no blood was shed at all. He would refuse to sign a military order that would have seen the Italian army take up arms against Mussolini and his black shirts in an attempt to repress fascist violence. Only 2 days after the 30,000 black shirts had marched on Rome, the king handed over power to Mussolini after Prime Minister Luigi Facta and his government resigned when they had been denied the ability to declare a state of siege in Rome and fight the fascists. As the black shirts paraded around Rome, Mussolini set Italy on a crash course with destiny and set in motion the elements that would see it allied with the Nazis and Japanese in only a few short years when they entered World War II and on the wrong side of history. Welcome to A Dog's Breakfast History. I am your host, and I've got a question for you. What is fascism and what is a fascist? And I hope you don't mind me saying so. Bloody great question, host.
Bloody great question.
And thank you.
Fascism.
It's a far-right authoritarian political ideology. And for those who are new to the left or right of politics, the far right or right wing appeals to those who believe in maintaining strict cultural and ethnic divisions and a return to traditional social hierarchies and values. While it differs by region, historical, political and religious context, yay for religion,
Yay.
it often leads to many celebrated activities such as oppression and political violence and forced assimilation, ethnic cleansing, and everyone's favourite, genocide.
Yay.
Think 1930s, 1940s Germany for far-right thought and activities, and you will create a fairly decent picture in your head. It is characterised by ultra-nationalism, authoritarian leadership, a dislike for communism and socialism, militarism and violence, and totalitarian aspirations. So why do we care about fascism? Well, we're on the march to war, and we need to know about fascism because fascists love war. Also, because I fucking said so. So I have some juicy yet out of context quotes for you that hopefully will give you a slight insight into fascism. Here's one. Fascism is a religion. The 20th century will be known in history as the century of fascism. From Benito Mussolini. I should do these in an Italian accent. The press of Italy is free, freer than the press of any other country. What the fuck is that? The press of Italy is free, freer than the press of any other country, so long as it supports the regime. Again, Mussolini. The socialists ask what our program is. Our program is to smash the heads of the socialists. Again, Mussolini. These are fucking awesome. Peace is absurd. Fascism does not believe in it. Mussolini is onto something here. Here's one, and this is definitely one he definitely said. I'm a dictator, I'm a fascist, I'm here to suck and fuck.
I'm gonna come.
I'm Mussolini, presumably maybe in his correspondence with Hitler. Mussolini, known as El Duce or the Duque, was a fascist, clearly. He was also Italian, clearly. So how are Italy and fascism linked? Well, for those non-learned individuals like myself, Italy is essentially the home of fascism. Italian fascism is also known as classical fascism or just fascism. It was created by two dudes, Giovanni Gentile and another fella, and you probably guessed this one by now, Benito Mussolini. They wanted to make Italy great again. The problem with Italy after World War I was it was not so great. They were on the winning side, yet they found themselves up shit creek, and they only wanted one thing, land, lots of land. And one of the reasons for this was the illusion of prestige and power. Now, if you've listened to my previous episodes, you know all about the Treaty of Versailles, but we're going to rehash some parts of it now. So Italy had signed a treaty with the Allied powers in 1915 for land, and more land post-World War I. The deal was simple: fight for the Allies and get bulk land at the end of the war. And we know that the Brits and the French were a bunch of double-dealing, baguette-eating, secret pact-making bastards back in World War I times. So we already know this is not going to end well for Italy. Fast forward a few years, and 600,000 dead Italians later, and guess who was royally pissed off? The Italians. See, the good old Tweety of Versailles had reared its ugly head, and the Italians essentially got iced out by the Yanks, the Brits, and the French. The phrase, and I'm going to butcher this, Vittoria mutilata, was thrown around. It meant mutilated victory. And I would promise I'll never do a dodgy Italian accent like that ever again. That was shocking. Mutilated victory became a rally cry, feeding a sense of national resentment, public anger, and fueling a thirst for revenge. It was fertile ground for radical ideologies. Italy had completely botched its economy during World War I, just like most European nations had, just the way things were. They'd taken out plenty of loans from loan sharks who wanted to break the collective kneecaps of Italy, and printing money, lots of money. And as we all know, when you print a shit ton of money, it leads to a stupid amount of inflation. So well done there, Italy. So with the Italians presumably wheeling wheelbarrows full of cash to the local store, the cost of living went through the roof. Soldiers returned home to no jobs, and the government did fuck all to help them. As you can imagine, unemployment soared and economic collapse seemed like the hip thing to do. And when this is happening in the early 20th century, the best thing to do is to riot, leading to the Biennio Rosso. That Italian accent came back. Anyway, the 2 red years in 1919 and 1920, which saw strikes, love-ins, and land seizures. Socialists and communists were licking their collective lips and threatened to establish order. As we heard earlier, fascists do not like communists or socialists. So, post-World War I Italy is jam-packed full of weak parties all vying for leadership and unable to form any form of stable government. Italy went through 5 different governments in 3 years. That's as many times as I changed my jocks in a 3-year period.
Disgusting!
So the Italian government, stinking like a cheesy dick, somehow eroded the public's confidence in democracy, which is just outrageous. And the public were gagging for some form of strong leadership. Amid all this chaos and gagging, our friend Benito Mussolini saw his opportunity. He was a recovering socialist, having been kicked out of the Socialist Party for being far too keen to get into World War I. Having done an almighty backflip on his socialist views, he joined up and served in World War I, putting his money where his mouth was in terms of being all for war. After having served in a few different battles in the war, and obviously coming out of it alive, he formed the Fascist Revolutionary Party in 1919, which then became the National Fascist Party in 1921. Given that fascists like to be a little wishy-washy and contradictory regarding their ideologies, this allowed Mussolini to draw on aspects of nationalism, anti-socialism, and militarism, which expanded his appeal to a wider spectrum of disillusioned Italians, of which there was a shit ton. But, and this is a rather huge but, you can't have some sort of fascist regime without some sort of fashion statement. Remember that, kids. So, Mussolini created the black shirts. They wore black shirts. They were a paramilitary group made up largely of pissed-off war veterans, of which there were plenty after the Great War. And, as was the case in most countries post-World War I, these war veterans felt betrayed by their government and were keen to get one back, so to speak. And get one back they did by causing all sorts of hell. They attacked socialist buildings, burned down union offices, and broke up strikes. They were violent. Really violent. But it was all supported by the middle and upper classes. They feared a socialist revolution and didn't mind the black shirts kicking the shit out of the socialists in the meantime. Good on them. The black shirts provided a sense of order and strength, which was great for the common folk, and they intimidated political opponents, which was great for everyone else. They wore their cute little black shirts and became a symbol of fascist power. Not only do fascists love their fashion, but they also love their propaganda, and Mussolini was no different in this regard. Mussolini had a fairly robust approach to his propaganda machine, which consisted loosely of 7 areas: control of media and messaging, cult of personality, use of mass rallies and spectacle, control over education and youth, radio and modern technology, suppression of dissenting voices, and international propaganda and foreign policy. Each one of these really speaks for itself and doesn't need much elaboration, because I'm sure you can use your imaginations and figure out what control of media and messaging is, as well as use of mass rallies and spectacle. They speak for themselves. The only one that really needs further exploration is Cult of Personality, which I thought was just a really cool Living Colour song. Anyway, this is how he betrayed himself, not too dissimilar to how Hitler would in a few short years, or Gaddafi in Libya, or Trump does now.
Yay.
His speeches were theatrical, had dramatic pauses, over-the-top gestures, and often done from balconies to create a sense of grandeur and connection with the masses. All of these different areas worked extremely well, and still do when employed, even in this day and age. Mussolini's use of propaganda allowed for multiple messages to be put out to try and connect with different groups within Italian society. Stability for the middle class, power for the war veterans, and economic prosperity for industrialists. So, with the propaganda machine well and truly greased up, Mussolini and the black shirts are ready to use their favourite tool for change: violence. Mussolini and 30,000 of his black shirts marched on Rome, giving the appearance that a bloody coup was about to follow. However, Mussolini had worked his magic well and was able to be appointed Prime Minister on the 30th of October 1922 without bloodshed. He made sure to keep non-fascists in his government to keep up the appearance of constitutional legitimacy. But Mussolini wanted only one thing: total control. The Acerbo law was passed to assist in giving Mussolini and his fascist party the majority in the government. He would then ensure his dominance in the 1924 elections through the use of intimidation and fraud, which is surprising. It really is surprising. And when socialist leader Giacomo Matteotti, when socialist leader Giacomo Matteotti exposed this intimidation and fraud, well, he was killed, wasn't he? He was kidnapped by 5 dudes who were all part of Mussolini's secret police. He was stabbed several times in the back of the car and was dumped 23 kilometres north of Rome. Mussolini would accept responsibility for his supporters' actions, but denied he was in any way, shape or form involved. Because, of course he wasn't. Come on, guys, he's a fascist. With no one willing to speak out against him now because they're going to get fucking killed, in 1925 he declared a dictatorship, banned opposition parties and silenced the press. Remember that quote I read out earlier about how Italian press was the freest press ever? Yeah, well, that's because they would die if they weren't. Anyway, the democratic facade Mussolini's black shirts had been maintaining well and truly crumbled away. So how did our friend Mussolini rule once he had power? Well, it turns out it was actually amazing for everyone. Juventus won UEFA every year, pizza and spaghetti was introduced to the world to great acclaim, and Ferrari were able to sort out their pit stop strategy, and Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz went 1 and 2 in the F1 World Drivers' Championship, and they won the World Constructors' Championship. Clearly, I'm talking shit. Clearly. Because Ferrari will never figure out their pit stop strategy. And it was actually horrible for everyone. It was really bad. Mussolini officially created a secret police, the OAVR, the OVRA. I'm going to say this, and this is going to be horrible. Organisation per la Vigilanza et la Repression del Antifascismo. They're not even words. Anyway, they were a fascist secret police responsible for surveillance, intimidation, and eliminating political opposition. Sort of like the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. Thousands were imprisoned or sent to remote tropical islands as political prisoners. So I guess it wasn't all bad for everyone, was it? Mussolini also used censorship for all forms of communication, and any/all public dissent was stifled. If anyone opposed fascist policies, you faced being sent to the tropical islands. Think about that. He outlawed labour unions and introduced a corporate state, which was designed to eliminate class conflict. Strikes were banned, and any sort of dispute was resolved by the fascist-controlled courts with a bullet to the head. Strikes became a thing of the past. He also introduced an education system that had a revised curriculum to emphasise fascist ideology, nationalism, and loyalty to Mussolini. History books were rewritten, and teachers had to swear loyalty to the fascist state. Further to that was the youth indoctrination, exactly like what the Hitler Youth would be like in a few years. This is The Opera Nationale Ballela, the ONB, was a fascist youth organisation that indoctrinated children of ages 8 to 4 in military skills and how to be loyal to the state. Their slogan was Believe, Obey, Fight, or in Italian, Credere, Obbedire, Combattere, which actually sounds like an awesome slogan. And the fascist regime emphasised gender roles. So women were encouraged, remember the tropical islands and the bullets ahead, to become cum receptacles and homemakers. I'm definitely cutting that out. Women were encouraged to have many babies and be homemakers. If women did work, they were shamed and fucked off out of the workforce. See, the ideal woman, according to Italian fascism, is submissive, devoted to her family, supportive of her husband, and there to make sex trophies on a regular basis. But it wasn't all secret police and sex trophies. No, it was also invasion, supporting other fascist dickheads and forming alliances with Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. So you remember something called the League of Nations, the love child of US President Woodrow Wilson, that the US didn't even join? Remember them? Well, this impudent excuse for diplomacy and peace just let old Mussolini go and invade Ethiopia in 1935 and just do whatever the fuck he wanted. They condemned the invasion, so you know they were serious, but what good did that do? Or what good has that ever done, actually? That's a whole nother episode all by itself. Anyway, they wrote them a strongly worded letter.
And we will write you a letter telling you how angry we are.
Mussolini used chemical weapons and widespread atrocities to ensure he was victorious in Ethiopia, and you would be if you're using those tactics. And like that, the Italian Empire was created. This whole thing boosted Mussolini's popularity on the home front, but inevitably isolated Italy internationally, pushing it towards Nazi Germany. And that's bad. Initially, Mussolini was almost struck by a lightning strike of logical thought when it came to Nazi Germany, and Hitler in particular. He viewed Hitler with caution and imposed the annexation of Austria by the Germans. However, they shared anti-communist views and a mutual interest in expanding their empires, and this ultimately brought the two of them closer together. So there you go, a meet cute. So, because Mussolini didn't realise all those dudes in the really sharp clothes with skulls all over them were somehow bad, he went and signed the Rome-Berlin Axis Treaty in 1936 and then the Pact of Steel in 1939, which sounds like a Pantera album. It sounds awesome. Mussolini's relationship with Hitler would have profound consequences for Italy because, no shit it did, Hitler was a really bad dude. Italy ultimately joined in World War II because Adolf said so, and the Italian military would get absolutely slapped around by anyone they came up against. After being Hitler's little boy toy, Mussolini would be left high and dry by his old pal when the Allies rocked up in 1943. Hitler was off getting slapped around by the Russians in Russia, and then the Allies in North Africa, and then very soon he'd also be getting slapped around by the Allies in Europe as well. Things were looking bad for the Pact of Steel. Things were so bad that Mussolini got arrested, then put back in power in some crappy fascist state in northern Italy. He then got captured again, but this time he was captured by Italian partisans who were none too pleased with the former dictator. And this group of dudes were known to hold a grudge. This grudge-holding bunch of fellas just up and shot Mussolini. Some say he begged like a dog. Others say he barked like a dog. Others reckon he said nothing at all. Either way, he was strung up and paraded for all to see after he'd been shot dead. So there's that. Ultimately, fascism died a pretty horrific death in Italy and Europe later on. So we can all be happy that no dickheads like Mussolini ever took office again around the world. His impact was pretty widespread, and it led and gave encouragement to other fascist leaders around the world at a really pivotal time in the world. This has been a Dog's Breakfast History. You're all awesome. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Cheers.